Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Parker from The Conscious Self and welcome to another episode of The Conscious Cast. And today we're going to be talking about breath work and why it is so important in our lives to look after our breath and breathe beautifully, and helps us connect to nature and all the good stuff that comes from breathing and breath work. Okay, so normally I start with the breath work, but I've got a bit of a cold, you might be able to hear me, and there's a wealth of information on the rest of the channel with breathwork. We've got free breathworks, we've got free guided meditations and stuff, and I'll leave a little link up here for you to check out for after this episode. Okay, so I want to begin by talking about breathwork and its connection to your health. Now, we're always thinking about health and fitness in the sense of, working out your muscles, looking in good shape, the aesthetics of working out. But and also a diet too. Let's not forget about your diet. There's two fundamentals to looking in shape and feeling healthy, right? Is eating and working out. But the aspect that we've neglected, which is finally catching up, I think, in contemporary science and in the fitness world, is how you breathe. Now, how you breathe is so important. Breath work as a whole is so important, but how you breathe day to day is so important. Let's take, for example, breathing through our mouth. So breathing through our mouth is not great for our health. They've linked it to diabetes, they've linked it to heart problems, they've linked it to sleep apnea. And also breathing through your mouth for long periods of time, especially from a young age, can lead to a misshapen jaw, can lead to your teeth cramping on each other, and it really has an effect actually on your physical health. Now, why it's underutilized in the fitness world is because breath work can literally change your capacity for exercise. And if you're a sports person or an athlete, breathing right is so fundamental. I think we're finally catching up. There's some great facilitators out there, some great influencers who are sharing the sports-based tools for breathing. And I think that's very important. So if you do breathe through your mouth regularly, you can lead to health problems later down the line. But breathing through your nose is so good for you. So think about how your nose actually is. Like, what is your nose and how big is the organ? So your nose may protrude from your face, such as mine. However, your nasal cavity is actually the size of a fist in your face. So within that, it produces nitric oxide. It also is connected to your sexual health as well, because it's made from the inside is made from the same skin as your nipples and your bits. Weirdly, but that is very true. And conditions like polyps can actually give you erectile dysfunction. So breathing through your nose is so powerful. The amount of roles it plays within the body. Nitric oxide, for example, helps calm the nervous system. It helps repair muscle fibers. It also helps to fight off bacteria and viruses in your nasal cavity. Think about how your mouth has no filter, and how when you're breathing in, you're not filtering the air when it comes in. Your nose has these little tiny hairs in there which filter particles, also the nitric oxide that clears bugs, viruses and bacteria in the nose, and you've got your sinuses too. So there's like a filtration system. Also, it cools and warms the air depending on what you need. So when I breathe in, if I'm in a cold environment, when I breathe in through my nose, it's actually heating the air for my brain and for my body. When I breathe through the mouth, think about how a cold, short, sharp breath of air can feel quite constricting on the lungs. But when you breathe through the nose, it actually heats or cools the air, depends on the temperature. Powerful stuff, right? This is fundamental if you train. So some of you may already know that I'm a Thai boxer. I've been for a lot of years. I love boxing. I love combat sports. You may see that I have a deviated septum, and this is impedes my breathing a little bit. But it's not to say that I can't breathe through my nose and correctly and stuff. But and a few of you may have a deviated septum too. It's quite common. So in sport, and I'm going to use my sport and Muay Thai and stuff and how I recover. So the breath is so important for recovery, not so much for breathing at the time, because when you're training, your mouth drops open anyway because of the CO2 offloading from your muscles. So your muscles use oxygen, they offload CO2, and you expel it through your mouth or through your nose, however you breathe. And when we're really training hard, our mouth drops open. There's a reason behind that. So the reason being is that when you need an extra gear and you need to go into your sympathetic nervous system, which then produces noradrenaline and adrenaline and cortisol, which allows you to do more, be more, to run faster, and gives you more energy. That's why that fight or flight is there. That's what fight or flight is, really. Let's say there was a lion chasing you back in the day. You'd drop your mouth open and you'd run like the clappers, and you breathe through your mouth just to get that extra gear. Nowadays, we breathe through the mouth quite regularly, can feel like you're in your nervous system because of that, and also lead to ill health. Breathing through your nose alleviates ourselves of that and puts in our parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest. So important to be in a parasympathetic all the time. Now they've related health problems to breathing through your mouth and also creating your sympathetic nervous system response to IBS. Cortisol raised in the body, stress all the time in the body leads to bad gut health and also lack of production of digestive enzymes, and that's why your parasympathetic is called your rest and digest, because when you're in your parasympathetic you produce those beautiful hormones or digestive enzymes that help break down your food and help manage the body. But if you're a sports person like me, I like to be quite fit, I try and focus on recovery. So in between rounds, it's a great analogy, this, because we're actually doing it in between rounds with Thai boxing and boxing. Everything's in rounds. So you might do a 3-minute round and you might have a minute rest. So within that minute rest, you've got to focus on recovery. But if your breathing's not right, you're not going to recover. So you're not restoring yourself before you go back to the next round. And the way to manage that is to not get more oxygen into the body. Yes, of course you need more oxygen into the body, into the muscles, of course, but it's actually your CO2 tolerance is what you need to up. So CO2 we always think is a byproduct of breathing, like it's just a waste gas that we expel, but actually it plays vital roles within the body, such as nerve stabilization. So building your CO2 tolerance can actually make you fitter, stronger, and more stable nerves. And the nerves run the body, right? Electrical impulses go around the body, and if they're not stable, then you're not stable. So the breath is the first port of call to connecting to yourself, to recovery, to it's another aspect of health that we're just touching on now as the fundamental within our training and within our health. So now I like to look at it as like a health and fitness. Nowadays I like to look at it as a threefold, as a three-aspected thing. And it's not just what I'm eating. It's not just how I'm training. It's not how I'm looking after my body. It's how I'm breathing too. How am I breathing in training? How am I breathing in between rounds, for example? And how am I improving my breathing during training and after training? Now, you may have seen these before, little nasal strips. I've just took mine off to do this video. I wear this when I sleep. And that's so I can breathe better when I sleep. That's so I can breathe through my nose when I'm sleeping, so I can stop snoring and not breathing through my mouth, which can create sleep apnea. If you ever woke up when you've had a cold, your nose is bunged up, and you've been breathing through your mouth all night and your mouth's really dry, so you lose loads of hydration through breathing through your mouth as well. When you breathe through your nose, you don't lose that hydration. And we've all felt that, right? We've all had a cold and woke up with a really dry mouth and feel really dehydrated. That's what that is. So another way to improve your recovery and also improve your fitness is to do breath holds. So you can do breath holds in the moment. We could just sit here and do a breath hold right now. However, when you're training, they are by far more important and beneficial. Now, disclaimer here, I'm not saying you should hold your breath all the time when you're training. I think you should do it every now and again and do it within your capacity. Don't do it until you pass out. Please be careful. Breath holds really do help your recovery, and that's what you're looking for when you're training, is good recovery. But yes, let's say for example you're a sprinter or you're a runner, long distance runner, actually holding your breath on parts of the run, or you're training up towards a big run, will actually improve your ability to run faster and further, because you've improved your relationship with the air. And I think it's time to allude to the fact that the air is all around us. It connects us all together. We're all breathing at any one time. Everyone breathes. Everyone breathes. And how much energy you get from the air around you. Now, not even if you're a sports person, but you might eat three meals a day and you might snack here in the day. And, you get some energy from that. But think about how much energy you're getting from the air. You're getting energy all the time from the air, consistently, constantly breathing, with or without conscious effect. You're doing it subconsciously all the time. You're always drawing energy from the atmosphere. So the quality of your breath is really, really important. How you breathe is very, very important. If we breathe short, shallow breaths into the top half of our chest, we're going to feel out of sorts. We're going to feel short of breath. We're going to feel in our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight, too much stress hormone going around the body. But if we take regular, steady, good breaths with good breathing habits, we can feel relaxed and in the moment and have a great relationship with the breath and the air around us. Now, I don't just want to talk about breath and health. There's loads of reams of information about how breath and health are connected. I would love to go into more of the conscious self philosophy with the breath and why I teach the breath predominantly. That's my favourite thing to teach when I do my forest retreats, when I do any retreat or workshop. I teach the breath. because I think it's a fundamental truth. It's something that connects us all together. It connects us to nature. It connects us to everything that's ever been before us, our ancestors, the forest, the trees, the sea, the cosmos. So the breath is a vessel for being present, for peace and contentedness in the moment. And if we cast ourselves into the future, for example, it leads to anxieties. If we cast ourselves into the past, when we've got negative things that have happened in the past, it leads to depression. Being present is so important. It's so important for the human psyche. We don't want this monkey mind to take over and to just run our life. The breath brings back present to the moment. It brings back presence to thoughts. It brings back a clearing of self. It brings back an anchoring to the moment. It brings focus to where you are, to where your feet are. Be where your feet are. Now, you may say, well, I can just focus on my feet and I'll be where they are. Yes, you can, absolutely. But the breath, with it being a constant and consistent, you're always breathing. It's always there. It's an anchor. You can always come back to it. And that's why I teach it at retreats and events. Now, I also teach it at retreats and events because it connects us to nature, and nature is ever present also. And it's this beautiful relationship we have with the universe and the cosmos, the breath. You're constantly breathing. In Hermetic philosophy, they talk about how the breath is your direct relationship with the cosmos. You are that beautiful fire and breath. That breath gives you animation, it gives you life. Same in Stoic philosophy with penema. Penema being the word for fire and breath. It's even in the inanimate as well. They talk about how it's in, let's say, a stone, for example. Yes, it's not moving, it's not alive per se, but it is held together by that penema, by that fire and breath, by that energy. Your relationship with the cosmos is connected to your breath. Think about the air streams that run around the planet, that pass through all around the planet, all over the place, these streams of air. And there's a really good book by David Suzuki called The Sacred Balance, and he talks about how statistically you are breathing in an ancestor's breath. We've all sharing in that breath. Think about when you go into the forest, or you go to the sea, or you go to somewhere in nature that is beautiful for you, and how important it is to breathe in that air. We take that lovely, beautiful sigh when we go to the forest, for example. We go, and you can smell the forest air. You can smell the pheromones from the trees, from the pine and cedar. You can smell the seasonal changes. You can smell the spring flowers. You can smell the summer air. You can smell the river. You can smell the dampness of the woods. You can smell the leaf litter decaying in the forest. You can smell that leaf decay. You can even smell the mycelium of the mushrooms. And it's that beautiful relationship we have with those smells which connects us to everything as well, and how that affects our body. It affects our nervous system. It also affects our immune system, the microbiome, the pheromones. They actually improve your natural killer cell function. So you actually leave the forest healthier than when you went in. And it's through the breath. It's through the breath that you get these benefits. It's through breathing in that forest air that actually enhances your being. So it shows you how you're connected to nature. And for me, the breath is nature's greatest tool. The breath is something that is so fundamental to what we are. Not just to our health, but to connecting to nature, connecting to the cosmos, connecting to everything around you, connecting to your ancestors with each breath. And that's why I teach this in the forest. That's why we go to the forest and I do these events and retreats where we all gather in circle and we all breathe together. We all take a big deep breath, that forest air, we do breathwork modalities, and we connect to where we are. Presence, number one. Number two, to each other. And number three, to nature. Now think about the relationship you have with the trees, for example, in the forest. You're sharing that cyclical breath. You're breathing out the CO2, they're breathing in the CO2 and offering oxygen back in return. And that's true connection. We can't see it. We can't see it with these eyes, but when we can really feel it, we can understand how connected we are. If ever you felt disconnected to nature, if ever you felt disconnected from what you are, go into the forest and breathe and really enjoy the breath. Enjoy each breath. Again, think about, I was talking about the meals that you eat every day. You look forward to that meal when you enjoy that meal. You really enjoy that meal that you're looking forward to, a cheat meal, some chocolate cake, whatever it may be, and you really feel it, you're like, this is lovely, salivating, fantastic. Same with the breath. When you go into the forest or somewhere in nature, or even in your home, and you take that breath in, really lovely, scented, beautiful breath, breathe it deep and enjoy it. Feel the nutrients and sustenance, that air is supporting you with your life force, It's your life force energy. If you stop the breath for 3 minutes, you're gone. It's the first thing we do when we arrive into this world is we breathe in, we take one big breath after we've exited the womb, big breath. And then when we leave this, the last thing to leave us is the breath. And that's why air and spirit and penema and connection to the cosmos is all related to the breath. In theology, philosophy, in many different texts, ancient texts and proverb, the breath is the life force. The breath is that yogic energy, it's that prana. It creates life force. It's in Chinese philosophy, it's chi energy, you know, the breath creates that energy. And that's why we do these breathing practices which help us become more present, become more connected to the breath, you know, to alleviate ourselves of blockages through the breath. I think another thing to talk about with the breath is how it makes the unconscious conscious. Now, what I mean is through heavy breath work. I teach a heavy breath work. You may have seen other facilitators leading conscious connected breathing. I do one called the conscious breath, very similar, where we do heavy breath work. And it taps into something unconscious that we can't tap into normally. We tap into the body's wisdom. And through this heavy breath work, it's almost like you are experiencing another state of consciousness. And people can sometimes tap into emotions that were suppressed, tap into trauma. Obviously, the space has to be held properly. Tap into traumas, release emotions, release stress, release tension in the body. They may experience some shaking, some rattling, some moving of the body that they can no longer access, but now they're accessing it through the breath. And that's the making the unconscious conscious. It's the same with bringing awareness to, you know, just still regular breathing and beautiful breaths, because you can make, you know, I mean, the breath for the most part is unconscious. We breathe all the time, we breathe every day, but seldom do we bring consciousness to it. But when we bring consciousness to it, we can bring ourselves into that beautiful, calm and relaxed state, the present. We bring ourselves into the present with the breath. And that's why it's such a powerful tool for meditation. That's why it's a vessel for peace. Because we can find peace in the moment, we can find presence and peace and contentedness through the breath. And there's no wonder that it's connected to so many philosophies and theologies, because, you know, that even in Zen Buddhism and stuff, they talk about being present, and how being present is your true state. And it's just the mind has become a lousy master. You know, we want to rein it back in and make it a beautiful slave. So the breath is a tool for that. So everyone talks about bringing balance through the breath. And yes, it does do that. 100% it does do that. If you've got a busy life, you should sit and breathe and meditate, probably for longer than most people if you've got a busy life. But everyone who does a breathwork practice and meditation practice will benefit. But the thing is the breath is not just a tool for balance in your everyday life. It's also a tool for focus. Now, there are opposite ends of the scales, balance and focus. Balance is fantastic, but focus is also really important. Now, if you've got something you want to achieve, you're focused, right? And that's what the breath work does in the moment. It allows you to bring focus to your mental bandwidth, your capacity for sitting with yourself. And especially for those who struggle with meditation, breath work is a great avenue in there to be able to facilitate the sitting for longer, the sitting in contentedness for longer. Now, I know you're probably sitting there thinking, well, I can't meditate. And I'm constantly fidgeting, rolling my shoulders, I'm thinking of the to-do list. The monkey mind is distracting me, pulling us from left to right instead of being centered and where I am. Now, the breath will allow you, facilitate you to sit for longer. Number one, because you're doing something. You know, you maybe have a breathwork exercise, for example, Ujjayi Pranayama, where we shift nostrils, alternative nostril breathing. And that gives you something to focus on. Remember, I talked about focus and how important focus is. It gives you something to focus on, something to practice prior to the meditation. And also the beautiful effects that are happening when you're doing these breathwork exercises that are happening within the body, you know, the balancing of the endocrine system, the balancing of your hormones with that, the alleviation of stress and anxiety within the body of tension, and the calming effect that it has, bringing you into your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. All those things, if they're not worked on prior to meditation, may distract you from meditation, may lead to overthinking. For example, if you're in your fight or flight and that's running 100 miles per hour, you can feel it in your chest, you know, it's driving thoughts. That anxiety drives thoughts. You know, the feelings drive the thoughts, because there's got to be a reason for you feeling that, right? Your mind's a processing machine. It's like, oh, what am I looking at? What have I got to do? What have I got to fix? What's the problem I need to solve? So we have to address those things first. I think it's very important. Yes, some people can just sit and meditate. Like myself, I like to do the breath work so that I'm in the state for meditation. I'm in those delta brainwaves so I can just sit in that contentedness. I wanted to end on this. Next time you go into nature, I want you to take the most big, beautiful, conscious, connected breaths to where you are, to nature, whether it be the seaside, the forest, whether it be with friends, family, whether it just be on your own, and just really be with your breath. Think about how it connects you to the cosmos. Think about how it's that beautiful constant that runs through your life from start to finish, and it's always there. Develop a relationship with the breath. Develop a beautiful relationship with the breath, and be where your feet are. Be where your breath is. Anchor yourself with the breath and enjoy that breath. You are your breath. You are nature. You are connected. And if ever you feel like you're not connected, if ever you feel like you're not part of this world or part of nature, and you feel a disarray with everything around you, get in touch with the breath. Get in touch with nature via the breath, and realize how important and how beautiful and how amazing you are just to be here, just breathing that beautiful, beautiful air. And if you'd like to find out more, please follow me on the social media tags. They're in the bio. It's at conscious__man, at the.conscious_self on Instagram, and on Facebook, The Conscious Self. And you can also follow what we do, our events and retreats, and you can book anything you like on the website at www.theconsciousself.co.uk. Big love, everyone. I'll speak to you all soon.